the like, if you were here like after a year or two, like what would you want to do, or like I don't know. It was just sort of unclear
Oh, okay.
what they were getting at. So I mean, it's fine.
I mean, that kind of question is usually aimed at, do you plan on sticking with our company?
Yeah,
Or
and
do you have like a bigger picture ideas in your head of where you'd want to be in this company in a couple of years? You know?
yeah, yeah. So I kind of went with that.
Cool.
Um, yeah, and she was just like, yeah, sorry, I worded that kind of weird. It's been a long day. So we made it into a joke. It was fine.
Oh, good.
And then yeah, the other dudes that came in, it was just like we totally hit it off.
That's awesome.
So yeah, and
I have no doubt in my mind that you hit it off with them.
oh, thanks.
Yeah, that's awesome,
Yeah,
dude.
I like if I were to guess, I'd say it definitely went very well. So
That's killer, man.
If I were to guess, I'd say it definitely did exactly this.
it definitely maybe
It maybe
is.
definitely was the best thing ever.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome actually.
That's great.
I believe you. I believe you.
Place is chill as fuck.
Well, hi everybody. There's
Hey
Hello.
everybody.
people in the chat, and there's some people in the thingies and stuff.
Pretty
And are you showing them your porn collection? Whoops! My puppy just fell off some stairs while he was trying to jump up to the couch.
puppy.
It was pretty cute.
Ah, sorry.
Yeah, you gotta mute that stuff, dude.
Yeah, dude.
Brah.
Brah, dude. Brah.
Anyways, so let's kind of
Sorry.
jump in on some chatting and all. Yeah, you gotta mute that stuff, dude.
Yeah,
Heyo.
dude.
Um,
What did I do? So what are you working on, Ryan?
well, I've got a couple things going on. I've got a track I got to do for, I think Zella Day is the name of the artist.
Azella Day.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, she's got some shit that's on the radio right now. I don't really know it, but it's like your average kind of pop with like an actual live band behind it.
Yeah.
The drummer is an old friend of mine who used to drum for The Sleeping, and he hit me up. He's like, "Yo, we just tracked this stuff. Can you do this?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, cool." So he sent me a hard drive. One song is 38 gigs.
Nice. Was it track?
One song.
That contains every take that has ever existed on the face of humanity.
Oh, there you go.
Jesus.
Yeah, so that was
And
a lot. And
they want you
then
to comp it too?
what's that?
They want you to like comp it all too?
No. I don't have to comp it. It's already kind of put together, but I think all the extra takes are in there, as like, B playlist, C playlist, etc.
Word.
Damn.
So that'll be fun, man. Pop track. And then he's also doing some like kind of hard rock slash metal project, and sending me that as well. So that's only I think 2 songs though. It's not a ton of stuff, but kind of like how we were talking about yesterday when we were talking about total time to work on a record.
Yeah.
The amount of time that goes into the first song is always significantly more than the remaining ones because you spend all this time figuring out some of the basics of how to get your drum sounds together using what it is they provided you, how to get your bass sounds, and this and that and all that crap that kind of can transfer over to most of the other songs as well.
Yeah.
At least get you 80% of the way there.
Yeah. Totally.
So the fact that it's 2 separate bands with kind of completely different genres means it's basically going to be like full-on time to go through those sections of the song.
Damn.
And then on top of that, I've kind of jumped back into the wild imaginary stuff.
Nice.
The reason I kind of stepped out of it because I was just like, I can't give you a timeline because there's so much other stuff happening right now that I can't tell you it's going to be done on this date.
Right.
And I guess they sent it off to somebody else, and they got it back from somebody else, and they were like, "Oh my God, you need to be mixing this because everything else is what this dude didn't work out."
Oh no.
And I get it. I mean, like we've been working on that project from the start, right? So it's all about feel and energy and vibe and all that stuff. And I guess when you send it off to somebody else and they don't understand the feel of the whole project, they might just suck it all out by quantizing everything to grid and just kind of kill the way it vibes,
Oh, bummer. I get it.
Especially with a project like that, it's tons of electronic percussion and electronic stuff happening with
Yeah,
real drums, real guitar, real piano, real vocals. Like it really does kind of need to mesh together in a very controlled way. So,
totally.
so
It's
yeah, that's what I'm in the middle of, and then obviously my regular day job stuff, just doing more design work for Avid.
That's
lovely.
cool.
How about yourself, Kenny? What are you working on right now?
Um, Nothing mix wise. Well, actually, I do have something that's kind of gone by the wayside a bit because I've been busy with other stuff. But I'm actually doing some little bit of post production stuff, which we haven't really done any of in this class, huh?
No, not really. We've been kind of meaning to though.
Yeah, it'd
Yeah.
be good to touch on that because it's
We should.
I feel like when I took a course on that, um, I learned some things that don't necessarily pertain to mixing audio, but they help me think of it in a slightly different way.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's I recommend we touch on it someday soon.
Like
So yeah,
any
I'm doing that and just been practicing with a couple of bands just for funsies. I think
Bunsies.
with the hardcore band Penalty Kill, I think we're going to per my request, do an Offspring cover, which should be fun.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah, I want to do something off of Smash. Maybe in the title track Smash.
Nice. Um,
That's cool.
that reminds me, we should have Rachel come on here sometime.
Yeah.
Because she does post production with Pixar and all that.
That's
So
dope.
she'd be a good person to have hop on and geek out on this shit. Plus, what we do is a whole different world of shit than what she does. Even though we all use the same program to get it done. Kind of wacky.
Yeah. I feel like it's a more utilitarian aspect to it. Like it's like numbers and like ones and zeros and certain levels of I don't know. It's like less creative. I don't know if it's more creative or less creative, or it's like not
It's
creative at all, or I
It's
don't
kind
really
of
even
just
It
know.
a different way.
depends on what portion of it you're working on, right? Because some of it
Yeah.
is okay. I've got 9,300 footsteps I need to place.
Oh
Yeah.
fuck.
You know what I mean? And that's pretty mechanical, not the most exciting stuff, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Well,
But then, sorry.
it's for reasons like that. Is I actually I saw The Conjuring 2 last week, and
Yeah.
it was corny at times, but man, once you kind of like learn post production audio, it makes you really think of how these jumps and how these sounds are calculated, and it's awesome.
Totally.
There's like a real psychological aspect to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's and it's pretty genius stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny because I think like with music, there's room sound, and then with post production, room sound is a completely different thing. Even though it amounts to kind of the same thing, the whole approach to get a room sound is totally different.
Right.
So there's some cool stuff.
What are you doing?
Um,
Sorry, I was eating his
Doggy,
bed.
doggy, doggy.
Weird thing. I don't know why I'm saying that.
Yeah.
Don't eat your bed. That's not your food. Eat your food. Um, yeah, man, it's pretty cool. Especially horror movies, particularly have some of the awesomest sound design.
oh yeah,
Because visually it might just go to black, right? And it's supposed to be goddamn terrifying. And if it's just black and silence, well, it's not necessarily terrifying.
hmm
Yeah.
They do all sorts of wacky shit where they'll like put like a 16K tone behind something just to make you feel uncomfortable. It's not even necessarily that you really hear it. You just
yeah,
feel uncomfortable when
yeah.
it hits. Just
Yeah.
awesome.
Well, and if you think of like those kind of just big those like those sounds when a jump happens,
Oh
it's
yeah.
it's like you can kind of it's fun to try to think of like, okay, what is that made up out of? It
Yeah,
could
it's
be
like some dude with a giant chunk of metal and a hammer just whacking it, like
yeah, mixed with like an orchestral hit, mixed with like a fucking like credenza falling down the stairs.
why credenza?
I don't know. It's because it sounds like a credenza.
Sounds like credenza, man. It sounds like yeah. All right, got you.
There's this one movie called it's called Sinister, I think.
Oh yeah, That's
It's
pretty
either
good.
Sinister or something else like that. But they do that. The sound designers did this thing where they had this little like motif every time the thing was what the monster or whatever it was close. And what was scary about it was if you weren't a sound person, you didn't really like pick up on the sound. You just like would know that something bad was about to happen. But as
Yeah,
a sound person, I heard the sound and I was like, oh fuck, like this thing's gonna pop out at some point, like real soon. The problem was they weren't showing you where it was gonna pop out. Like it wasn't obvious. So you're like, fuck, this thing is not on the screen. This is not on the screen. Oh fuck, there it is. And it sounded like someone chewing glass. It was terrible. It was
yeah.
so disgusting. Like it was just this glass chewing thing. And oh my god, that movie fucked me up.
I have a feeling that the Foley guy did not chew glass to make that sound.
I hope not.
Well,
Yeah.
not to get too deep into it, but for when I saw The Conjuring 2, there's a trailer for this one. The guys who made Evil Dead. There's
Yeah.
a movie coming out called Don't Breathe, and it's
Okay.
about these like three people that rob a blind guy's house. But
Oh, I saw that. I saw the trailer
yeah,
for that.
it looks fucking sweet.
Yeah. Blind
Uh,
guy's like, fuck y'all. I was in Vietnam.
yeah, he like it turns into like what looks like one of the scariest movies I've ever seen.
Wow, sounds awesome.
Yeah, yeah, and it's basically just like a robbery, but he just like the way he comes back at them, he becomes like this blind, you know,
Like ninja motherfucker.
yeah, murdering machine basically.
That's crazy.
So let's talk vocals.
Yeah, so let's jump on vocals, man. So this week we were gonna kind of go through um, the general processing that takes, a raw vocal from raw vocal to finished commercial releasable product. Um, there's a lot of ways to do this, obviously, but we'll kind of review some of the basics of stuff that we generally do pretty much every time. Um, Robert did ask a great question that starts this, though. Let's talk about recording the vocals itself.
I think it's a great idea.
So, Robert's asked, how much does the room really affect your recording? So, I got a pretty heavy opinion on this, especially since there's so many people that seem to think, recording a vocal in a closet with like a bunch of foam stuck up sounds good.
Yeah.
I think exactly the opposite. Anyways, let's start with Kenny. You record a lot of vocals. How
Yeah,
much do you think the room affects it, and what do you do to kind of accentuate what you need out of it? What do you do to kind of eliminate out of the room? And what's your methodology for all those things, really?
I think I think it's easy to mess up thinking about room sound with vocals. I think there can definitely be way too much, and I can also think there can be way, way, way too little. Um, so I mean, it's sort of a balancing act for me. I mean, luckily, what I usually do and the way I usually set it up here, I kind of know what works for me. Um, and that's typically not a whole lot of deadening. I usually have like a big blanket or comforter behind the singer. But other than that, there's not much else going on. Um, Obviously, there's isolation. I don't want headphone bleed or anything like that.
Right.
Um, but other than that, I guess I've learned my own ways and learned how to work with that really well and how much room sound I add to that, in mixing and what
So,
works best.
so after you track vocals, do you end up kind of adding in room verbs, or do you usually have enough in the tracking?
So I almost always add some room verb, just to liven it up a bit. And um, like I said, I don't like to track it too dead, but I like it to be fairly dry, just so I have a huge amount of control.
Right.
Um, and unfortunately, it's really easy, I think, when you add a room sound later on, to have it turn into something that feels really artificial. So it definitely takes a little bit of I don't want to say experience, but like trial and error to get it to where it feels really right to me.
Nice. How about you, Dan?
I don't really have much experience tracking vocals, honestly. But the times that I have done it, I've noticed I've only really done it in like really in like actual studio spaces, and I've definitely like had situations where in those situations I kind of like I don't know, maybe I'm just tracking it in the studio room because it's a treated room. I don't really think much of it. But that being said, I've been handed stuff before um, where I'm like, you tracked this, and the microphone was really close to a glass window, wasn't it? You know what I mean? And like the singer was basically singing into a glass window, and the reflections were bouncing off of that, and that's why there's so much comb filtering in this track, right? And they're like, yeah, that's kind of it was really close to a window. Yeah, you're right about that. And I'm like, yeah, it sounds really bad. So I've definitely heard like poorly tracked vocals, but I just don't have enough experience recording it to really have an opinion on it. I'm actually
Well,
looking for a video that we did at Kenny's studio.
well,
Um,
you know what you don't like.
yeah, basically. Yeah.
That's a good. That's always a good place to start because we're problem solvers, right?
Yep.
Right. Right. Well, it's funny because one of the things I've noticed is that whenever someone has tracked something in a small room, I can always hear it.
Yeah.
When someone's tracked something in, anything else, I can't always tell where it is, which is probably a better thing, right? Because like you said, Kenny, um, I add in my own room anyways in mixing. Um, so when you've got a really small room and you can hear all these early reflections, it sounds small. You can tell that it was a small room.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh, and subsequently, then when you try and add in all these extra, this extra room verb to give it space, you're kind of competing with what's already there. Whereas if you've got a larger room, um, you can eliminate the early reflections, at least the really early ones, by having a wall like 2 feet away, and instead have them spaced out a little farther. But also at that point, if you've got room treatment in your room, it's kind of inconsistent reflections rather than just bouncing straight off one thing and coming right back. You've got your room treatment that kind of makes it an even dispersion of reflection. So it's almost like you can just take that and be like, cool, that's gone. Now let's you know now let's add in whatever we want to that is part of the sound we want in the room, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
uh, so yeah, usually the issue I have is when people have recorded their stuff in tiny spaces. I've never had an issue where someone recorded something in too big of a space and I was like, damn, it sounds too good.
Yeah.
That's true.
Well,
I
let's
never
not
thought about
forget.
that.
It also has a lot to do with what style you're actually going for. Should it be really kind of in your face and close, or should it be kind of big and ambient? I mean, that all should play a huge factor.
Yeah.
Right. But basically, like, the thing that's hard to eliminate is super early reflections.
I
If
see.
that's in your tracking, there's damn near nothing you can do in mixing to make that go away.
What's your opinion on those like vocal shields?
So the vocal shields are weird, right? Because technically they're in the mic's null pretty much all the time, right?
Yeah.
So what it does is it prevents the vocal from bouncing off the back wall and then reflecting into the rest of the room. But at that point, you're already off one wall and then off at least one more before you ever come back to the microphone, right? Like,
Interesting.
the more important one to shield from is the left and right side wall or the ceiling or like any of those that are just a single reflection and come back.
Mhm.
I gotcha.
Does that make sense? So, I mean, yes, they help, but realistically, if you put that up, I would expect someone to also place baffles behind the singer themselves as well.
I see.
That's actually the more useful help.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Ryan's not a big fan of those. It's funny when you mention those things. Those mud guards and all those things. Those were some of the most common things when I was starting out and I had like gear itch. I'm like, oh, these things are advertised all the time. They seem like such a good idea. And Ryan would always be like, nah, it's probably not really what you want.
Well, I mean, where are you now? Like, what do you feel about it? I mean, also, let's talk about what the actual design is there, right? you're talking 1 inch thick of foam, right?
Yeah.
Which means really 1K and above.
Oh.
Is the issue you really have, I mean, that's actually even higher than that. Is the issue you really have with reflections above that, or is it usually something wonky below that?
No, dude,
Whoa.
it's always below that. Like even in the room I'm in right now, like if I step back a bit, this is a cardioid microphone. Like you can hear the sound of the room, and if I handed you this as a vocal track, it would not be awesome, you know?
No, it's probably like 400 and 700, right?
Yeah, because it's just 360 degrees of drywall, with a little bit of panels up, but no real treatment at all,
Right. So, I mean, honestly, those can benefit a bit, but I don't view them as a single fixing solution.
Yeah,
It's really the rest of your room that you want, the part of the room your mic is actually pointed towards that you really want to kind of clean up.
interesting.
That being said, when I do track vocals, I track them in a very large room, somewhere near the middle of the room, with baffles behind the singer and potentially a baffle behind the microphone. But often I actually leave out the baffle behind the microphone, at which point the ceiling's still open, so you still get some of this big room. None of this feels like a small space,
Interesting.
you know? But anyways, yeah, that's just to eliminate early reflections.
That's cool.
Also, I usually put a baffle on the floor so you don't get a bounce off the floor, so they're standing on a gobo.
Interesting.
Hmm.
That's pretty
Yeah.
cool.
That's sweet.
Anyways, so so that kind of covers a bit of the tracking, unless there's anything extra you wanted to add into tracking there in general. I know there's some questions about microphones and all that. Yeah, good polar patterns, better microphones. Yes, they all help. Do they help more so than the room? Depends on the singer, right?
Yeah.
I've definitely done sessions where I had, a Neumann U67 right next to a Groove Tubes ST55, which is the Guitar Center brand. That mic's about $150. We actually picked the Groove Tubes because it worked better than the Neumann for the singer.
Yeah.
But
Love what happens.
it's their own. What about pop filters and all that, Kenny? Do you use them every time?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Um,
There's no, I mean,
this
I
picture,
feel
by the way, is an MA200. Wait, that's in Kenny's house, isn't it?
Yeah, we recorded a cakewalk video of a bunch of microphones, MA200, and just kind of all the different vocal microphones, or all the different, like 6 different vocal microphones. Not even really vocal microphones, they're just microphones of this rad singer, my friend Ingrid. Can you guys, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's really relevant to watch
I don't
it.
want to play.
Yeah, no, we don't have to watch it. But yeah,
Yeah,
no,
but
I pulled it up because I was like,
the
oh, here's a
logo
picture of Kenny's
on the
studio.
headphones- Is the logo on the headphones taped out?
Oh yeah, totally, dude.
They're like, you can't see that these are Shure headphones,
They're totally Shure headphones.
yet you're allowed to like have the brand of the microphone there?
You can't see the brand name.
no, I can't see the brand of the microphone.
I mean, in the whole video, you never see a brand of microphone? I mean, that's impressive, but cool. All right, cool.
Yeah.
You know what?
Um, so, but this brings up the question, okay, so you've got this mic hanging upside down. What is the reason?
Kenny.
Oh, the reason it's upside down?
Yeah.
Because of the heat displacement from the tube.
Yeah, dog. I'm glad you know the proper reason, because I feel like we've talked about this too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So any tube mic you hang upside down. The reason is that heat rises. So as the tube heats up, you don't want that rising heat to hit your
Affect the
capsule. Then it affects the capsule's response. Like seriously affects the capsule response. When the capsule gets hot, it gets like really kind of brittle in top end. It gets weird. So yeah, if you flip it, now the heat rises, never touches the capsule. Capsule stays at the same temperature the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
But with non-tube microphone, it's irrelevant. You can do whatever you want. It's really just people think that this looks professional, so a lot of people just use tube mics, and it does look. It looks dope.
Yeah. That's pretty funny. I never knew that.
Well, apparently you learned something too, Kenny. Thanks for teaching. All right, cool. So let's pretend we've got perfectly tracked vocals now. Perfect, flawless, immaculately tracked vocals.
Yeah.
What do they look like to you, Dan? You've got a session, right? So let's pop it open and take a look.
Totally. So I've got a session here. some vocals that a buddy of mine tracked. I'm actually gonna get rid of all this stuff because it's not relevant right now. And typically, this singer I think is pretty dynamic, and I'm pretty sure he tracked these on his own because they're they're pretty dynamic. Like he gets
Yeah, you can
soft, he
see them
gets
all over the place. In fact, right where you got that marker for what is it, chorus one,
yeah,
it looks like it pins.
yeah. He definitely like pinned some hits, and so yeah,
Actually, can we
so
zoom into that if you don't mind? The chorus one marker, it's a little bit forward from where you are.
oh sure, yeah.
Yeah, see that?
Yep,
Yeah, look at that. Does that actually peak?
I think so. Yeah.
Can we zoom out vertically and then zoom in horizontally? Yeah, I want to see if those square. Oh, yeah, they do.
Yep.
Damn.
Yeah. So
Well, thanks,
he
guy, for giving me vocals that are shit.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this track, it's some new content that we were given, not given, something I'm working on, and I just didn't feel like putting you guys through the torture of listening to metal vocals for 2 hours. So I figured this would be a nice alternative. Um, and yeah, it's just sort of, it's actually, you guys will recognize the song when I play it, but typically when I get tracked vocals, they'll be a little bit more controlled than this, and obviously they won't actually clip. Um,
Obviously.
yeah,
Come on.
obviously.
You know that half the people that are in Mix Wednesday receive vocals that are clipped like this. I mean, I do. I receive vocals that look like this from quote unquote professional studios often.
Wow, that's crazy.
It happens. It
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah, no, Greg is just a home studio guy. So he was, I mean, I was actually really impressed with what he did because he literally like has zero background of recording, nothing. Like I think he's just been teaching himself it over the years. So I was actually really impressed with how these sounded.
They taught him everything he knew, right?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I noticed about his vocals when I first opened up this project, we can kind of jump into these vocals and kind of talk about perfect vocals and tandem. But one of the things I noticed first of all was how dynamic they were. We already talked about that. Yes, they clip a bit. We chatted about that. But typically when I see vocals that are tracked well, there's a level of control that's actually in the delivery of the vocal track that is already there. You know what I mean? And by level of control, I mean the waveforms are all kind of unified in size. You know, the singer might have a sense of vocal dynamics or vocal microphone dynamics. Maybe you can explain that a little bit more, Ryan, because you're a live guy. You have to deal with that stuff so much. Um, but like it's like a sense of self compressing where they move the microphone away or they turn their head a bit. What is that called? Is there like a technical term for that, Ryan? Oh, he's not even here.
I mean, that's just called microphone technique, really, if you want
There
to
he is.
just break it down to its basics.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
the
Yeah.
really, really good singers assume that there is no compression, right?
Yeah.
Because what they're hearing back in their headphones, for the most part, and I would actually suggest that studio guys do this as well, is pretty close to an unprocessed vocal.
Yeah.
And there's a good reason for this, because if they're hearing basically an unprocessed vocal, they can deliver in such a way that without adding processing, they are closest to the final product. Does that make sense?
I think so. Basically, you're not by them hearing compression on their voice, it would allow them to
They can
they
hack
wouldn't
it.
have to compensate for anything.
Right. So they
I
can
see.
have a hack version of it, not try as hard, whatever you want to call it,
Gotcha.
um, and just rely on the compression to fix it for them. Now, this isn't always an awesome thing, right? Because let's talk about basic mic technique, right? When someone's singing really quietly, they pull the microphone closer to their mouth, right?
Yeah.
Which means more proximity effect,
It's like the NPR effect.
right? But when you pull it away, because maybe they're belting, there's less low end because now they've lost the proximity effect, right?
Exactly.
So what this means is you need to manage proximity effect like really, really, really well as an engineer. But at the same time, you don't need to slam something with a compressor, right? So if we want to talk about tonality and maintaining consistent tonality, sometimes it is better to keep a vocalist like 4 inches away from the microphone all the time.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And in the studio have the tools to kind of compensate for all this stuff. So if you feel you're better off managing level using your tools like that, then cool. But if you feel like you're better off managing proximity, then cool, do that. For me, for live, I have an extraordinarily high noise floor. I've got a drum kit. I've got, stacks of amps. I got a grand piano. I got all this crap happening on stage. A horn section right behind my singer.
Yeah.
Um, Subsequently, so if the singer still is 4 inches away and starts singing quietly, my gain before feedback of vocal versus other shit becomes unmanageable.
Yeah.
So for me, it's necessary to learn to do a proximity effect and reduce the amount of compression.
I
Because the
see.
more compression I do, the more I bring in the background noise. In a
I
studio,
gotcha.
this is less relevant because in a studio, the background noise should be somewhere around minus 60 dB.
I see. Interesting.
So yeah, there's two ends of how to manage it. If you keep your vocalist a specific distance away from the mic all the time, you've got a very dynamic performance, but you have consistent tone. If you have your vocalist using proximity, or not proximity, but well, I guess using proximity to manage level into the microphone, then you might have to deal with tonal shifts more, but less compression issues, right?
Gotcha.
Uh, in many ways, you can kind of get both by keeping the minimum distance from the microphone to about 4 to 6 inches, because 6 inches away doesn't have tons of proximity effect.
True.
Um,
So
and
would you
if you
say
keep,
at 6 inches you're most definitely capturing the tone of that microphone without being influenced by proximity effect?
for the most part, yeah. So if you say 6 inches is my minimum distance, and you've got a singer singing right up there for the quiet parts, and then backing off to 10 inches for the loud parts,
Yeah.
your tonal shift won't be insane, but your dynamic control of what you're tracking is going to be pretty on point.
You
I
just
get
said
you.
6 inches is my minimal distance.
I don't really get it.
That's what she said.
But
Whatever. Go on.
um, well, no, that was about it actually.
All right.
That's totally cool. So,
Well, we've talked about tracking a bit.
yeah,
Yep, we're done with tracking. Let's move on.
cool. Yeah, so when I first get a vocal,
Actually, 1 second. Right before we move on, Kenny, do you track through a compressor on the way in?
I have, but I usually don't.
What's the reason?
Because I'm chicken shit.
I'm afraid of it, man.
I'm a chicken shit. No wonder why you're gonna get that job, Kenny. You just fucking drop shit like that.
That's not really the answer I was expecting. But all right. Cool.
I mean, isn't that the reason why most people shy away from compressing on the way in?
Yes, but I mean there are other reasons to not do it as well, because if you're tracking through compression on the way in, unless you have an EQ before that compressor, your compressor's reacting to all sorts of shit like plosives and proximity and all this crap that it really shouldn't be reacting to in terms of what you need as a final sound. So there's a bunch of good reasons.
So, are you team compress or don't compress?
I'm saying if you're going to compress on the way in, you should probably do all your corrective EQ before that compressor.
Yeah.
And you probably don't want to destroy it on the way in either, because there's no undoing that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I have also seen guys who do that are typically the dudes that track and mix the record. Because they have they kind of know where it's gonna go. You know what I mean? So they might as
Right.
well save themselves time and the client's time, because you're probably at that point charging people the same. Who knows? And you're just saving time at that point because you already know how it's gonna sound. So if you have a setup, a mic setup already, and it's just a shootout ready to go, you pull out the microphones you don't want, everything's set up ready to go. I can see that being a pretty simple thing to get to kind of become efficient at over a few years. You know what I mean? So.
Well, I mean, if you're the guy mixing the record, why not get it, 3/4 of the way there in tracking? I totally understand that. But again, without doing your corrective EQ and all that stuff, your compressor is reacting to absolutely all the signal.
Yeah.
And
That's
ultimately, that's not what you want it to do.
Right.
You can do a high pass on the side chain and all that stuff, and it gets you closer, but it's not ideal. Tons of dudes I know will, compress like, barely, like 1.4, 1.6 to 1 or something like that on the
Yeah.
way in, just to kind of, clean it up a tiny bit so that their ability to get into their A to D converter doesn't clip, like they can kind of hit it in a place where it seems to make sense. But that being said, at this point, with 32-bit conversion and 96K and all that, our dynamic range is so big that you could gain trim up something 100 dB and you won't even hear noise floor.
Yeah.
So 100 might be extreme because then at that point your noise floor is like somewhere around like 60.
Yeah.
That's
But,
great.
but you get what I'm saying,
Yeah. Totally. Totally. I guess that brings us to the next subject. When I get vocals, at least for me, when I first get them, do all that stuff that we just talked about, take a look at it, see what I'm going to do with it. But it always starts for me with a filter. You know, always starts with a filter. On this particular track, the filter is actually pretty low for what I typically do. Typically, I'll go up to about 200, 250 on 250 hertz, I should say, on the vocal track. But this one, the guy's voice, and I'll play it for you in a second. The guy's voice is really high pitched. Like he's got a higher voice. So the low end content, there isn't like much low end content, and the low end content that is there was actually kind of nice. So I kind of decided to kick it back a little bit and stick it around 120, 120, 126 right there. And that's kind of the reason I do this is because one, like Ryan was saying, you know, there's a certain amount of, when you eventually throw your compression onto a vocal track or any track for that matter, that compression is going to be reacting to all the low frequency content, all of the stuff that's going on in the room. Maybe hits the microphone, maybe hits the microphone stand with his foot, who knows. But the compression reacts to all of this, and a filter right at the top of the chain typically helps take all of that out. And I've actually been noticing this is kind of comes back to the discussion about post that we were talking about earlier, and it still has to do with audio production. A lot of plosives kind of get taken out in this process. You know what I mean? Not all of them, and not every single one, but I've noticed ever since I started filtering stuff, once we started Mix Wednesday, and Ryan was unraveling the secrets or just his method for the stuff, I was like, wow, like it's kind of taken care of a lot of stuff at the same time. Not only has it made the tone better, more controlled, it's also kind of taken care of a bunch of just kind of utility stuff. You know what I mean?
Right.
Which is really cool. I didn't really think about that until I started doing it. So all of a sudden, my plosives and all that really basic stuff kind of went away once I started using filters. And then now that I'm like starting to actually like get into the live world a little bit, I understand why filtering is like just completely necessary. Because it's just so much noise everywhere, ridiculous. Yeah, but yeah, after that, it's I guess should I play this vocal track? I guess I should actually finally play it for you guys.
You listen to unprocessed?
Yeah, totally unprocessed right here.
Now if you're feeling kinda low about the dues you've been paying, future's coming much too slow, and you wanna run but somehow you just keep on staying, can't decide on which way to go. I understand about indecision, but I don't care if I get behind people living in competition. All I want is to have my peace of mind.
Sounds pretty good.
Yep.
Sounds
Yeah,
super 80s metal, dude.
he's pretty. He's pretty good. He's got a pretty good voice for that stuff. He's the singer on that band, the Dead Station that I used to be in a long time ago.
Gotcha.
Yeah, he also played drums on this, which is pretty funny. So yeah, so secret's out, the cat's out of the bag. Yes, this is a cover track of "Peace of Mind" by Boston. The entire session is that. So once we're done with the vocals, I can play it for you in context where I'm at in the mix. But yeah, I mean, for recording it on his own and not having anybody sitting there telling him what to do, like he did a really good job just tracking it, I think. But obviously there are some fundamental things like how dynamic he is and all that stuff that I think just that's the way his vocal is. The filter takes care of the kind of the low stuff. Like I said, there's not really much low stuff going on. So kind of brings us to our next spot. Now, His vocal didn't actually sound that crazy weird to me. There wasn't really a lot of tones, but there was some gnarly stuff going on in kind of the mid-range here. So I added what we call corrective EQ. Now, corrective EQ, we talk about different types of EQ in this class, or just in Mix Wednesday in general. We always specify corrective EQ and we specify creative EQ. Typically, corrective EQ is subtractive EQ. It's kind of simple, right? Taking out frequencies that don't match the vision of what you had in your head, or frequencies that are just simply annoying. Last week, we were able to look at some of this really in depth. We were doing heavy metal guitars or whatever, and those have so much gain in them, and there's so much to heavy metal guitars that it's really, really obvious when you can hear like frequencies that are sticking out and are really annoying. Vocals are a little bit different because, the pitch moves a lot, and the human voice is just something completely different than the guitar. So, but fortunately in this situation, his vocal track didn't really have many of those frequencies that stick out. I would typically take those out, but for this one, I just kind of bandpassed the mid-range right here. And it just kind of made everything a little bit less gnarly, because once he gets his like really high, that stuff, that's when that stuff really comes out. And it's just way, way too abrasive and actually pretty fatiguing at the same time. So that's why we talk about subtractive EQ first, because it just takes out the crap first. And you can in a sense say that filtering, this kind of cleanup, it is a corrective EQ, but it's also kind of cleanup. Which one do we kind of talk, like, is it cleanup, Ryan, or do we consider it corrective? Is it both? I don't know. It's kind of ambiguous to me.
I consider cleanup to be the high passing. I consider cleanup to be editing to cut out noises and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I also consider cleanup to be some of the gain staging stuff. So actually, this brings up the question, which has actually been asked in the chat now. Doesn't this look like it's pretty hot and a little bit too hot for plugins and mix headroom in terms of where it is in the track? Now, obviously, we don't know the zoom setting you've got here, so I actually don't know how hot this really is.
This is actually the zoom set. This is the regular zoom setting, so it's pretty freaking hot.
So when you hit play on this, how hot does it hit?
Let's take a listen.
Now if you're feeling kinda low about the dues you've been paying, future's coming much too slow. And you wanna run, but somehow you just keep on staying. Can't decide on which way to go.
Well, what kind of meter do you have?
He's on digital, or did you just switch it to VU?
I switched it to RMS.
Oh, RMS? Yeah, okay. I mean, honestly, your RMS level is somewhere around, minus 12 to 18, it looks like.
Yeah.
So I don't see this as, too peaky for a plugin.
Yeah.
Especially considering the internal headroom that works in plugins these days. You're not on an HD system, so you don't have TDM plugin architecture kind of limiting what goes between plugins. That's a whole other ball of wax that we could jump into. But
I'm so glad I don't have to deal with any of that.
it's crazy, But yeah, so this doesn't look insane, but it's kind of funny because this reminds me of a conversation I was having today during the day on some forum about using clip gain versus using a trim plugin on stuff. And there was someone arguing that using clip gain is way faster. And I mean, maybe if you're trying to clip gain everything.
Yeah.
But when it comes to gain staging for this kind of stuff, it is a track-by-track thing for me.
Oh, yeah?
Always is. So I've never really understood someone that argues that clip gain on a track-by-track basis is a better move, especially considering, I'm assuming on here, actually, if we go back to the arrange view, the edit view,
yep.
This is a single take all the way through. These are just printed.
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, they're
this
all
would be the clip gain. But some of the stuff I deal with is 40 edits. It might be a comp track, and it might not be consolidated on purpose so that I have the option to change things out.
Yeah, totally.
At which point, clip gain becomes a huge pain in the ass. Although yes, you can triple click to select them all and do a clip gain change there. But that kind of stuff is not undoable in a very easy manner.
Yeah.
If I make a clip gain change and then I put on a plugin and all of a sudden I go, oh man, you know what, my gain staging it's still off by a tiny bit or whatever it might be. There's not an easy way to undo it without just redoing all of them.
Yeah.
You know, anyways,
No, I feel you,
regardless,
man. I totally agree.
that's
I think it's a super destructive feature. I think it's great for certain things, but it doesn't have a bypass button. You know what I mean?
right. And I have a very discrete view of clip-based workflows where you're fixing a single clip to match it to the rest of the track versus track-based workflows, which is I want to turn this whole track up by 3 dB or this whole track down by 3 dB so I sit within my gain range.
So
Actually like getting tracking options, or should us artists just submit our favorite take? Ryan, what do you think?
Mixers actually like getting tracking options, or should us artists just submit our favorite take? I almost always want to have the options, but I do want a definitive, this is my favorite, this is my comp, this is the one I want to use.
Yep.
I want the extra playlist there as a background, just in case for some reason I go, you know what, this section right here during this pre-chorus needs a double on it, and since we didn't actually track a double, I can take the second take from this, pull it into a double, and do something exciting with it, you know?
Yeah, but ideally, I like the main playlist to be what they think is the ideal take, and then I'd like to have maybe two other options of what they think are really good takes.
Right, I don't want to keep any of the absolute garbage takes.
Yeah.
That's not a helpful thing to me. I want the artist to comp me together their best thing. They're like, this is exactly what it needs to be. But there are, every once in a while, a situation where I go, you know what, I just need a double of this one word. Or there's maybe a bad edit or a bad cut in or something on one thing that maybe someone else hadn't noticed. Me having one extra isn't a bad thing. And to be honest, I don't mind when someone sends me a single song that's 38 gigs like what just happened.
Yeah.
Because I don't have to look at 90% of it. And also when they do that, they send me a hard drive. They don't try and send it to me over the internet.
Yeah, that's true. It makes it a little bit easier.
They know better. They know better than to try and do that. Basically, it's like, since I'm technically now using a laptop as my main mixing system, I'm not using a desktop anymore.
Yeah.
For me to download a 40 gig file, I have to leave my laptop here for half the day to download it, you know?
Yeah.
And there's just too many other things I got going on to be able to just leave it here while I'm, going doing something else. So
yeah, exactly.
I don't mind having all the extra takes, but I do want all my primary playlists to be my artist's favorite stuff, and I want the rough mix printed and in it at the top or bottom, wherever.
Yeah.
And that rough mix should be printed using their favorite takes.
Yeah. That's cool.
Anyways, back on track. Sorry, dude.
No. I think it's all relative to. I think what's cool about Mix Wednesday is we have these conversations. We don't really know where they're going to go because you guys ask us cool questions like that, and that's part of the whole thing.
Well, kind of like Andrew's question here, where he says, well, it's not even a question. He goes, when I use UAD plugins, most of them are calibrated to minus 18 dB FS. That's true for almost all plugins. Almost all plugins are calibrated to minus 18 dB FS at their 0 VU. But depending on your DAW, plugin architecture could be 32 bits going into it, could be 24 bits going into it, at which point your headroom exists way above even 0 dB FS, actually. But that gets complicated when we get into the math of how that works. But yes, if Unity is calibrated to minus 18 dB, then that means you're hitting your plugin at Unity. A slight aside, plugin manufacturers no longer expect people to hit stuff at minus 18 dB FS. It's simply not the culture of how things work these days, considering there are people that have never worked with VU meters, that have only worked with digital systems, and that have just been going for, if it's not red, it's good, for, at this point, a decade.
Yep, basically.
So in order for the plugin manufacturers to kind of be able to continue making stuff that sounds good for those users, they can't enforce the minus 18 dB FS thing. Even though maybe technically that's the better way to go, they've built these systems now where, like, realistically you can hit it at minus 6, minus 3, and it's still not going to do anything negative, per se, to the sound.
Yeah.
And that was a necessity for plugin manufacturers to do.
Crazy.
It's cool. It's cool because some of the plugin manufacturers, you hit it -18 and there's no saturation. You kind of start pushing it up and it adds saturation. Some of the other ones are super clean all the way up to -1.
Wow.
Anyways, that's totally an aside, but that question came up. A really good question, and like, there's a lot to be jumped in on in that regard. But let's keep moving on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
that's a whole class right there.
Yeah, basically.
That is totally a whole class right there.
Totally a whole class. So yeah, we talked about the corrective EQ. This vocal, pretty simple to hear what I'm doing on this vocal for the corrective stuff. This is actually a really good example because it's just one simple filter. I'll play it unbypassed, and then I will bypass. I'll play it bypassed and then unbypass it during the actual take. Let's take a listen.
Now if you're feeling kinda low about the dues you've been paying, future's coming much too slow. And you wanna run, but somehow you just keep on staying. Can't decide on which way to go. Yeah.
So when it gets to that point in there, and we can actually see it in the analyzer. Actually, I don't even know if you could see it in the analyzer because I have been trying to make it a point to turn that off when I first start EQing, so I can actually train my ears and then check it.
Actually listen.
Yeah, I've used my ears. What an amazing concept. Let's take a look at what the actual what the VU the actual spectrum looks like.
Yep.
Now if you're feeling kinda low about the dues you've been paying,
I think you have to bypass the band rather than bypassing the EQ to make the spectra stay.
Yeah, you're right.
Man, I hate this plugin, and even I know that. Go ahead, dude.
If you're feeling kinda low about the dues you've been paying, future's coming much too slow. And you wanna run, but somehow you just keep on staying. Can't decide on which way to go.
Yeah, that thing, like, holy crap, like that was like +6 at 1K. You know what I mean? Like that was really brutal.
It's got a bit of like the kind of nasal tone.
Yeah, definitely.
And funnily enough, I would then again, if I was engineering this, I would have tried to correct it in tracking.
Ah, okay.
Kenny, what do you think you would have done to correct that in tracking?
It might be more of a positioning thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Because a lot of times, if they're pointing too high or they're a little too high on the microphone or slightly off to the side, I feel like I get that kind of nasally shit.
Totally. Exactly.
Interesting.
I find that if you kind of point the microphone downwards, you do get more chest and less nose. If you kind of point it up, you get more nasal of the tone.
Interesting.
So had I tracked a touch of this and go, whoa, it's kind of, let's try this, I would have moved it a bit and then been like, let's keep going. And I have a feeling you could have corrected a good amount of that just through that,
Yeah. Interesting. That's really
But anyways,
cool.
we're not talking tracking, we're talking mixing. Let's pretend this is exactly like and you're like,
it's so hard not to, though.
Fuck you, tracking engineer. This is what you've given me. Now I have to deal with it.
Really funny. Cool. Yeah, so afterwards, this is where this section gets a little bit interesting and might be...
Well, so actually, hold on. One question, again, before you jump past the corrective EQ.
Sure.
So you've got this corrective EQ here, and was it just that this stood out to you and you go, I need to get rid of that? Or were you kind of jumping in and going, I need to fix something, what are the parts I can fix? Because the big question I always hear from people is, how do I know what to fix in terms of doing corrective stuff? Because until you have a good idea of what this thing needs to sound like in the end, you just hear a vocal, you go, okay, it sounds like a vocal. Do you know what I mean?
Well, so one thing that I typically do is I first listen to my reference. That's
so what was your reference in the song?
My reference was a Chris Tomlin track. This one.
God damn that Chris Tomlin. That's me.
So we got a long way to go.
That's amazing. It's funny, by the way, that I just said, God damn that Chris Tomlin, and that's like kind of a messed up thing since he's a Christian artist. I'm so sorry, Chris.
God damn, Chris Tomlin. Yeah. So that's where I start. That's where I always start. Ever since I made some recent mix revelations myself in my own work. So, and it's really just been all about the reference. I'm a proficient mixer, but I became a better mixer when I started depending on my references and monitoring them and understanding them and chopping them apart and just basically geeking out. So when you listen to your reference, you really want to understand what your track needs to stand up next to that reference. Don't let little petty things about mastering and on all that kind of stuff. Oh, this is an MP3, blah blah blah. All that stuff is I think somewhat of a farce. And I honestly feel that if you do your best to match your reference, you will become better in the long run. And maybe some people will say that's not the right state of mind, but it's worked for me, and it's definitely improved my way of thinking and mixing. So I start with that, and then I make adjustments to my own tracks, regardless of what I know or what I've learned, because every track is different. So if you got to do something wacky, fucking do it and see what it sounds like. So in this track, I listened to that and I was like, man, there's like this softness to his high mid range, and it didn't really have that in this. His high mid range is between that 1K area that's just naturally really harsh, was even more harsh, and it could be due to the tracking, but again, we're not talking about tracking, we're talking about mixing. So to correct that, I basically scoop that out. An easy way to figure out how these frequencies can affect or sound, to unnaturally kind of smoke out these frequencies, is to do what I've done in the screen right here. Boost the frequency and take a listen. Oop, let me solo that. Sorry, guys.
Yeah.
To the top of the company ladder. Hope it doesn't take too.
And then if you have a plugin like Fab, you can solo that band.
To the top of the company ladder. Hope it
Move it around.
take too long. Can't you see they'll come a day?
So you can kind of, it's this old school, not old school, but this just trick of just boosting something and seeing where it kind of sticks out. When I do this, I typically have the cue a little bit sharper. And then I just kind of move it around, and I never go above 6, maybe up to 9 if I'm really fishing for something.
But here's my question. You already know what you're looking for, right? You're hearing something you don't like, and you're trying to find it and then kill it?
That's exactly right.
Okay,
I'm listening, and I'm listening to my reference, making a decision, taking it out.
Okay.
And then the process of finding that frequency is more or less sometimes me either scooping it out like this and moving around in the area I think it's in, or boosting it if I'm really like trying to figure out where it is. So that's kind of how that goes. So maybe I can just drag this back up here. There we go. So yeah, that's kind of how that works, and that's the corrective EQ. So however you guys go about doing that, but that's how I do it. That's how it's worked for me. That's how So moving on, this kind of opens up a can of worms. We always talk about compression. When we ever talk about compression, it always turns into a whole class. So why don't we try and touch on compression without making it a whole class? I guess one of the things that comes with this track in particular is I always look at the first stage of compression as typically kind of a corrective stage of compression. By corrective, I mean this vocal's really dynamic. So I need to reduce those dynamics to get it to a place where I can actually control the signal so that when it hits my mix in the end, it's not making the mix jump around. It's not interacting with other instruments in a weird way. So there's a sense of corrective compression, or a sense of control that I'm adding to this. This particular example in this particular mix is slightly different in that I've kind of combined my corrective and creative compression into one place. And that's because I tried some corrective compression stuff and it didn't really work out. So maybe I can talk about that a little bit with you, Ryan, for a second, or Kenny, if you're there. I just see a picture of a dog. Typically, when I do my corrective compression, it doesn't actually exist as compression. And the reason is because it's not precise enough. And that's a kind of an interesting statement. But what I do is I actually will take a vocal track and I'll make the zoom settings in Pro Tools. That's the Control, Option, Command, and bracket left. You can use that shortcut to make your waveforms the regular wave height. or just the normal zoom height, I should say. And I select a section of vocal. I bracket crop it downward until the basically it's lined up to the wherever the center is right here, which is what does it looks like negative 13.3. And I'll actually take the draw tool and I will trace the bottom of the waveform. And by doing this, you're actually creating a level of corrective compression inside of Pro Tools on your vocal track or whatever tracks you choose
Just
to
by
do this
doing
with.
automation.
What's that?
Just by doing automation.
Yep, just by doing automation.
So
And-
functionally what you're doing is you're actually just manually controlling the overall output level.
Yep.
With a kind of compression that has no time constant.
Exactly.
Damn,
And-
dude, you're fast at that now.
Yeah, I'm really fast at that. So when I do this, yeah, I got really good at it. I got a new mouse, so the mouse has more grip to it, so I can just like really just like fly.
Pound through.
Yeah. So if we were to take like this section and bypass, and there's no really good way to bypass it, I guess. Oh, there is. I can just turn off read automation. That's right. If you were to take this section, play it, you can kind of hear what it sounds like with and without it. So let's take this. Let's turn this off, and we'll just play it real quick.
Yep.
I'll actually turn this up a little bit.
Well, you can't, because if you turn it up, then you're not going to be able to A/B them.
True. Okay, so I have
What
to.
you want to do is you want to put a plugin on that's just a trim that's got a plus 12 on the trim.
Yes, I'll do that. Right. Trim. Other.
It's almost like I've done this before.
Dude, have you done it before?
Hold
Yeah. So this is with the.
on, your volume is at 0 again. You got to put your volume at minus 13.
Yep.
13 is close enough. Cool. Go
That
from
works.
there.
Let's take a listen to this.
Now if you're feeling kinda low about the dues you've been paying, future's coming much too slow.
Let me finish that,
Okay.
actually. Just gonna finish that. Drawing. Okay.
Close enough.
So,
Cool.
so after that, let's go ahead, turn into read,
Turn off the trim.
turn off the trim, and
Actually, I guess leave on the trim.
Yeah, leave it on.
and leave on the trim. Oh no, is Pro Tools crashing on me? Damn it! Son of a bitch.
What happened?
I
What
don't know.
on earth would that be?
I actually had to reinstall.
I thought you were in 12.
I went to install it one time, and then it didn't. I can't remember what happened, but then I just had to work on something, so I just uninstalled it. And something didn't work correctly, so I went back and I installed 11 again.
Yeah, I'm on 12.5.2 now, and it's actually pretty fucking good.
Cool. Yeah, I'll have to definitely install that. Then we can all do this together.
Oh, you might not want to open this last version you just had. You might want to open the session file backup that actually has all the automation written in it. Oh, look at that!
Oh, caught it.
Look at that!
Except for
Sounded like Marty McFly for a second there. Look at that!
look at that. Hey, it actually caught all of it. Cool.
Because she wants to go with you, Dad. Daddy-o.
Daddy-o.
That's awesome. So let's take a listen to that again
Now if you're feeling
and hit save again because hell yeah.
Damn.
kinda low about the dues you've been paying, future's coming much too slow.
Now let's take a listen to what it sounds like with the read automation.
Now if you're feeling kinda low about the dues you've been paying, future's
Yeah, yours sounds crazy.
So,
Yeah.
so this is something that happens sometimes. So this is, like we said, very hot.
Yes.
So
What's your zoom setting on this? Is this default zoom?
that's a default zoom. So
Wow.
in this case, I would actually zoom out, and it would work a lot better.
Yo,
Because
go down by 1, and now try writing it. Let's see what it sounds like.
Okay. Let's do that.
One or two.
You happen to be really fast at writing this.
Yeah, remember I got really good practice on that metal track when I was doing like the snare drum for every single hit. Remember that?
That was fucking crazy. I was like, what on earth are you doing with your life?
Yeah.
Listening to podcasts.
Yeah, so I try to have it at a zoom setting kind of like that, where it's the most it'll go down is, I don't know,
Like
like
4 or 5 dB. And,
yeah, maybe 4 dB.
So
right,
yeah,
but
so
on the
that's what
one,
I was.
you have what, 13 decibels of adjustment?
Yeah, and that's why I was like, okay, so this track is different because, and that's why I actually went with a 1176 as my solution. So we actually have the benefit of checking out kind of two different ways of going about doing this, but this is typically what I do. So this is really good tips because I didn't really like. This is the first time I ran into this situation. I was like, oh, this isn't working like it usually does. What am I doing wrong? Oh, I'm just gonna figure this out. So let's try that. So taking your zoom setting and then reducing it by one. If your vocal is really hot.
Yeah, I mean, and if it's not hot at all, sometimes I go up.
Interesting. Okay, well that's really good to know. That's
Yeah,
really good to know.
yeah, that's kind of an odd thing, and kind of so I know how much we're fluctuating there, because it won't work if you're doing it too much, or
Yeah, I see what you mean. I see what you mean.
and then
That's really cool. I didn't even I like did it and I was like, I wonder why it's not working. Oh fuck it, I'm just
well,
gonna move on. you know.
well, and then also you'll find that sometimes when there's big spikes, big peaks, um, I don't always follow that completely. I'll do maybe like half of that,
Yeah.
because sometimes it can be a little too abrupt
Yeah.
and a little
Well,
too
it's
efficient.
essentially the plosive. I saw it most troublesome when I was working on it with plosives. I'd have to, and I just cut off the top of the plosive basically with automation, and I was like, this doesn't have to be in here. So it's
Mhm,
reacting like a compressor would. You know what I mean? So, um,
mhm.
but let's take a listen to this now.
Now if you're feeling kinda low about the dues you've been paying, future's coming much too slow.
All right, now
Sounds
play without.
Awesome.
sound
Now turn it off.
Now if you're feeling kinda low about the dues you've been paying, future's coming much too
Yeah,
slow.
that sounds amateur as fuck.
yeah, it sounds
Yes,
amateur as
it's
fuck.
crazy how the automation of this changed it from sounding amateur to smooth.
Yep.
And
So
like, I also realized that with the automation on, it's actually a little quieter.
yeah,
Um, but anyways, the idea here is that ultimately you're creating time constant free dynamic control, basically actual compression,
yep,
as opposed to what a compressor does, which is
Yeah,
compression of the signal plus a time constant artifact.
yep,
and going back to what I was saying, I mean, this gives you a lot more like visual, just hands-on control of what you're doing, because like there might be a peak where um, it's something a little, you know, unorthodox that's happening, and you don't want to go down on that whole peak, because it's going to be like you just have this ducking that it doesn't work, and that would be maybe something that would happen with a compressor. You wouldn't have much control over it. With this, you can just, you can curve that dip a little bit, so
Right.
it's a little less abrupt, and works a lot better.
yep.
So let's take this little section here. Let's move this automation up so it's up near the unity level of the microphone, not microphone, of the channel as a whole.
Yep.
And then you want to bring it just a bit above that so the average level is about unity. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, maybe even a teeny bit above that. And then let's play a section of this, and then a section of non-automated.
Okay. That makes it easy. They're just right next to each other.
Yeah. Oh, perfect.
Yeah, we'll play it. Just
Just play through that whole section right there. Yeah.
Kinda low about
oops.
Now if you're feeling kinda low about the dues you've been paying, future's coming much too slow. And you wanna run, but somehow you just keep on staying. Can't decide on which way to go. Yeah. I understand about indecision, but I don't care if I get behind people living in competition. All I want is to have my peace of
So you can clearly hear.
The automated one, it sounds, I mean, he sounds like a better singer.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is that even with the non-automated one being louder, the fact that it's got this inconsistent like push and pull of what's happening
Yeah.
makes it sound really unprofessional compared to the other one.
Yeah.
It really does make it just sound like a better singer. But anyway, so the purpose of doing something like this is that you can create dynamic control by using an actual dynamic control, which is fader level. And usually what I do with this, which is going to be a little different than what you've done because you've got the CLA 76 on the channel here, because you said you didn't do this, remember? Usually what I do is I send it after doing actual dynamic control into something like a CLA 76 so that it's hitting the CLA 76 at the same place all the time. What this means is that the amount of harmonic content that the plugin adds is consistent because it's always sitting at, let's say -3 gain reduction or -6 gain reduction.
Yeah.
The problem I have with not doing the automation before it is that when the singer sings hard, it hits real hard gain reduction. So it's got tons of harmonic content. And then during its quiet parts, there's very little harmonic content added. So it's very inconsistent.
Yeah. One question I had, Ryan, for you and Kenny, have you guys done this with a trim plugin and just simply to have control of the volume fader?
Like, you mean automated the trim?
Yeah, done the exact same thing with the trim plugin, and then just have the freedom of using the volume fader still.
Well, I'm on it,
but
so I've got a separate volume fader. I've got volume and volume trim.
I see.
So I can use volume trim to write all this.
well, if you
And then, sorry?
let's say you didn't have volume trim.
If I didn't have volume trim, I would probably write automation on my last plugin in the chain.
So like this thing wouldn't suffice, basically.
I mean,
Automating this.
you could do it with that. You could.
Okay.
Cool.
That's
But
cool.
we have all these plugins in a chain, right? You've got the CLA 76, or sorry, the API 550B here is your last plugin in the chain.
True.
If you need to automate level changes, you could do it on that. That's got an output level.
Yeah, that's true. I see. Okay, cool. Awesome. That's good to know. Yeah, I just I hadn't really thought about it, and I needed like some like an opinion that wasn't my own brain. You know what I mean? I was like, does this make sense? Am I missing something? Yeah. So that is the stage of compression that I always use, and actually probably just might keep this. I guess I can show you what I was doing without it, though. Without it, I was telling you guys how I had CLA 76 that was both corrective and character compression, basically creative compression, getting a tone out of it. Using a simple wave CLA 76, this is kind of what this sounded like. We can actually jump between this and the automated one and take a listen to what it actually sounds like. So let's do that. So I'll start this verse right here.
Climbing to the top of the company ladder. Hope it doesn't take too long. Can't you see there'll come a day where it won't matter? Come a day when you'll be gone.
This might be off, though.
So,
Climbing to the top of the.
Let me just adjust that output level. Sorry, guys.
all good. It was actually kind of close.
Cool. What were you going to say, Ryan?
How do you decide your attack and release settings here?
Oh, okay. Good question. That's a really good question because a lot of people tend to get really messed up about that. I find that's one of the things that a lot of people kind of get jacked up about when they use compression because they don't really know.
Well, when it comes to stuff like drums, it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Okay, it's related to transient, it's related to this and that. But when it comes to vocals,
yeah,
it's the one that most people don't seem to think of having a transient, right?
Right. Yeah.
I don't think of a singer as like the word they say has a transient. I think of it, this is just words coming out of a person's mouth.
Yeah. With drums, it's a bit more black and white, isn't it? It's I want it to hit harder, or I want it to I want it to hit hard, or I want it to have more release, basically. Right.
So how did you pick your settings in this?
I listen and I feel out the groove of the song or the tempo of the song. So the attack and release settings here are purely because I listened to the track and I adjusted these based on how fast his vocals are hitting the compressor and just basically the overall feel. That's really what it comes down to. It's just feel. Because when it comes to compression, I always say to myself, well, if I can hear something, if I can hear the compressor, something's wrong. You know what I mean? That's kind of how I always think about it. I'm like, the best compression is a compression you can't hear, and that's like,
Always.
and that's
Always.
like, yeah, and that's what I always stand by. So if you can
Actually, I take
hear
that back. Not always. There's times where the compression pumping is actually part of the sound. But yeah,
exactly, yeah, there is obviously, but when you're talking about like fixing something and you
right.
can hear the compression, you're not fixing it by making compression audible. You're actually, your goal is to make the vocal sound very controlled, and you're not doing that if you can hear compression. So what I do is I listen, and I just listen for the feel. And I know that sounds really strange for anybody who's not really familiar with that yet, but it's really just about feel. So don't think about it as like, I got to make it hit harder, I got to make it I got to have level control. It's really just about feel and character. And then whichever compressor you use after that is just really the tone of it. You know, I use the Bluey 1176 CLA just because it was, hey, cool, it sounds cool, whatever. But it's really the just the overall sound of the compression that you don't want to hear, and that's really what it's about. So yeah, that's.
So I mean, I understand your end goal there, but you didn't go through your process.
Oh, okay. Well, let's take a look at it. Let me just.
I mean, you ended up with basically like 12 o'clock on both of these, which is great, cool.
Yeah.
But how did you end up there?
Sure. Let me just load up the. Yeah. Is there a default setting on here? Start me up. Oh, whatever. So this is kind of how I did it. First, I just opened up the plugin, turned off the analog stuff because it actually adds a lot of noise once you start compressing your mix pretty heavily. Switch it to Bluey, pretty standard stuff. Let's take a look at it now.
Well, okay, let's pause for a second. You say it's standard, but why do you like Bluey better than Blackie on a vocal?
It feels like it reacts better to vocal than the Blackie does for some reason, and it's got a crustier tone. And I just really wanted that crustiness out of this because it's a vintage sound. It's technically I think the first version of the CLA, so it's like a super vintagey sounding 1176. And the Blackie, I feel like, is a more modern, just overall clean compression sound. This one's got a bit more like analog, like just the circuit sounds different in my opinion, at least. So that's why I want to go with this one because it's just got this higher pitched grittiness to it. So that was kind of just a creative choice there. First thing I do, I'll take a listen to the track.
Now you're climbing to the top of the company ladder. Hope it doesn't take too long.
Now you can hear the compression clearly because he's jumping all over the place and the settings aren't matched yet, right? But the first thing I do, I listen for that to see if the setting that loaded up is correct. But then I will actually make sure the volume is matched on the compressor. So
now you're climbing to the top of the company ladder. Hope it doesn't take too long. Can't you see there'll come a day where it won't?
It's actually pretty close, I think.
It's pretty close, yeah.
Yeah. So, but you'll run into situations where maybe it's the output level is super quiet and then you bypass it and it jumps in volume.
Yeah. Usually it's the opposite. Usually you turn on a compressor and it makes everything louder and you're like, this sounds good.
Yeah. So basically this happens.
Now you're climbing to the top of the company ladder.
So it's louder when it's bypassed, so this has to come up in volume.
Can't you see there'll come a day where it won't matter? Come a day when you'll be gone.
You don't want a volume difference between your compressor or the original vocal, simply because you're not really achieving anything but adding volume to your signal. And that's something that I think everybody in the room has basically done in their life. I know I did it. I know Kenny has a funny story about it. And I know Ryan, I don't know if you ever did it or you're just born with the knowledge.
I totally do it. I just pretend I never ever made a mistake because that's just way more fun for me.
Oh, okay.
I've never fucked up a mix in my life. I'm perfect all the time, obviously.
All the time, always. Yeah, so after that, I really just kind of, I'll start typically with the release here, the attack here, and what I'll do is I'll listen to the track and I'll adjust the settings based on the feel, like I was saying, just because I know what this kind of thing sounds like, and I just gotta figure out the attack and feel once I've now figured out how much this thing is going to be compressing by.
Now you're climbing to the top of the company ladder. Hope it does.
So this thing is jumping a little bit too hard, which means the attack is reacting quickly. So I don't really want to have that jumping sound, so I'm going to ease back on the attack a bit.
Now you're climbing to the top of the company ladder. Hope it doesn't take too long. Can't you see there'll come a day where it won't matter? Come a day.
So it sounds a little different now. It's a little bit slower. This is a really fast compressor, so it's actually probably reacting at what a normal compressor would default to. After that, it's about the release. This is the tail. This is kind of how the compressor jumps off the signal. If you say so, this is reacting a little too quickly for my taste. This is more of like maybe a drum setting where you really want a really poppy attack-driven kind of sound. This is too much for vocal, in my opinion. So I ease back on the release a lot.
Now you're climbing to the top of the company ladder. Hope it doesn't take too long.
Even that is still too quick for me. It's not smoothing out the signal enough for me.
Now you're climbing to the top of the company ladder. Hope it doesn't take too long. Can't you see there'll come a day where it won't matter? Come a day when you'll be gone. Whoa.
So at this point, maybe 4-to-1 ratio isn't really what I wanted, because I've kind of got it to a point where it's a really smooth compressor and it's still jumping all over the place. So I actually kind of want to add more balls to this compressor. That's the way I thought of it in my head, at least. So I actually just kind of went for it, and I just put it in all buttons mode.
Now you're climbing to the top of the company ladder. Hope it doesn't take too long. Can't you see there'll come a day where it won't matter? Come a day when you'll be gone. Whoa.
Absolutely crushing the signal. But it doesn't jump as much, and this is kind of at a point where I'm like, okay, this I think is where this compression is going to sound okay for this track, especially with all the other stuff that I'm going to be adding onto it. And that's kind of like, I think if I'm not mistaken, that's kind of where I got to. Yeah, it's about almost exact. Yeah, wow, okay, cool. Or, sorry, that's this one. Yeah, it's almost exact. So that's kind of the process of doing that. I hope that wasn't too long-winded, but...
No, that's good, It's a good explanation, although you just said that attack 1 was fast on there?
Let me...
On this device, 7 is the fast on both release and attack.
Yeah, I meant like the response is... what it's doing to the vocal is like...
I mean, either way, you started from an extreme, and you ended up in a place that fit exactly where you needed it to be.
Yeah, basically. I can never, because I use so many different plugins that model the 1176. Some of them
actually corrected the backwards thing. I know. It's weird.
Yeah, and so it always confuses me which one's the right way. So I can never remember if it's fast or slow. All I know is that one is reacting differently.
Honestly, usually you kind of end up in a spot where you go, oh, this one sounds good.
Yeah.
Who cares where it is,
Basically. And then sometimes some plugins are even wrong. Like I know I've seen some ones that are just completely wrong. It's like, no, that's actually not the slows. Okay, whatever. Fine. Fuck it. Yeah. So that's that. So these are the two different worlds, at least. This is more precise. I actually enjoy this automation trick way more. I think it's way more controlled, and it just gives you that freedom to completely have control, just like Kenny was saying earlier about.
Now here's a question. You've got this vocal going to a group, right?
I do, yes.
Can I see what's on that group real quick? Lead vocal all? Nothing?
Nothing, yeah. Actually, okay. I'm still at like mix 0 basically. I actually don't have any. I only have like compression on like my drums and my main bus. I haven't actually gotten to that stage of my mixing yet.
Cool. Can you do me a massive favor?
Sure.
Let's drag this lead vocal group up to right next to this vocal, maybe between the two, just so we can see them.
Sure.
Can we turn on the CLA 76 on the second vocal, the one without automation?
Yep.
And then can we take the CLA 76 that you just set on the main vocal and move it to the group?
Yep.
Not the bypassed one.
Oh,
although it doesn't really matter, just unbypass it.
Cool.
And then bypass the one that's on the track. Cool. So can we play through a bit of this with the automation and look at what the CLA 76 on the group is now doing? Because now the group is being fed post-automation.
Okay. Yeah,
so
let's do it.
Earlier we were seeing swings of like -12 to -3 to -20. It was all over the place. Hit play right now. I want to see how consistent the compression is, because my hope is that it's going to sit in one place and just stay there. Obviously, it'll go up and down a touch, but for the most part, sit in one range.
Yeah.
Hit play, please.
Now if you're feeling kinda low about the dues you've been paying, future's coming much too slow, and you wanna run but somehow you just keep on staying.
Yeah.
Looks like it just sits at -16, right?
What's that?
It looks like it just sits at -16, right?
Yep, basically.
So what this means is that you're getting a consistent amount of harmonic distortion. So anything that the CLA 76 is adding in harmonically is now going to be super consistent because it sits in the same general range of dynamic reduction.
Yep, that's true.
So now if you remove that and play the second half, the one that doesn't have the automation, so bypass this plugin for a second. And let's view the one that's on the channel. And let's play the second half.
Sure. Oops.
I understand about indecision, but I don't care if I get behind people living in competition. All I want is to have my
That is a little all over the place, but it's between 16 and 20, so you can't really see how all over the place it is.
Yeah.
But you do see it jumping between 16 and 20 a lot.
Yeah.
So if we were in a place where the meter was actually in like an easy place to read, you'd be able to see that it's kind of jumping gain reduction about 6 dB of swing, right?
Yeah, it really is. The other one was like, 16, and then it like one of the softer parts was at 7. This one is like all over the place,
Now, obviously, it's about what you want to get out of this. If you want it to sound really aggressive when the singer gets in, then you allow it to pin it when the singer gets in.
Yep.
But if you want consistency, and when it comes to things like pop and seriously polished tracks, consistency actually often wins.
True.
Because ultimately that means you've got control, right? If we take control, that means we can add the aggression when we want to, rather than relying on something else. Which is why a method like using the automation to make the actual dynamic range consistent, then using a compressor for the harmonic tone becomes a really relevant thing.
Yeah.
We're almost at 7. 7 o'clock for me, West Coast.
Yeah.
So we're technically near where we're done here.
Yeah.
But we haven't even touched on the effects. Let's do a real quick run through on the effects here, because I don't want to leave this out and jump off here.
Sure. Yeah.
Dan, what mouse are you using? You've been asked this.
Oh, I'm using this Logic Performance X guy.
It's an actual mouse, not a trackball, right?
Yep, the actual mouse.
Cool.
I got big fat man hands, so I can actually grip this thing. I used the Magic Mouse for a while, but it made my hand cramp, so I couldn't use it anymore.
I totally understand that. Yeah, I've got a stylus now, and I use it on my screen.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which, holy shit, does it make it so much faster to do this, dude.
That's awesome.
I mean, it's weird because like I'm not used to like kind of having my hand in the air and writing on it, because you can't be like leaning on it while writing on it.
Yeah.
But once I kind of get that figured out, how to like keep my hand in the air over it, or even just like maybe put like a hand rest at the bottom of it.
Yeah.
I'll be just absolutely crushing through drawing automation.
Blazing through it. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be silly. It'll be silly.
That's awesome. Cool. Yeah. So real quick, first effects up. We can go through.
What are all your effects? Let's just tell me what all of them are.
Sure.
And then we'll jump through each one.
Sure. Okay. So first one is a. That's kind of advanced. Let's get back to that. Sorry. First one is that I started with in my process was a room verb. This guy has basically no pre-delay. It's a very actually. Sorry. No. This is actually. Where is it? Okay, it's actually, I started with a room delay, a room reverb. Then I switched to a plate, and I made it a small plate with no pre-delay and a high frequency cut around 13 on the plugin.
Okay.
So then after that, I shaved it all the way up to about 616.
So what's the purpose of that verb?
So this was where I got into referencing the original Boston track, and I was listening to the vocals and like all that 80s like reverb, really loud, reverb that's on there. You know what I mean? So I was like, I'm just gonna try and match that. So that's kind of where that first one landed. So it was really just referencing making a big, large, kind of obvious reverb from the get-go. Because typically I don't start like that. I start with like a room ambient verb. But I was just like, well, I'm not really mixing that. I'm mixing an 80s rock tune. And they were all about reverb in the 80s. So we're just going to go for that. The next one was another plate. This was a second plate with a bit of a darker sound to it. Also shaved up to about 672. But it's a little bit darker because it's shaved down to about the high frequency cut is about 6.5K. And this one is more of a medium plate. So they're kind of operating the same space. They just have two different kind of tones to them because one's a medium plate.
So what's the purpose of the second one here?
Second one is to add a little bit more. This one is to add just like more of that plate sound. I wasn't getting enough of it with the first plate, so I added more. With the second reverb. That's what I did with that. After that, I moved to a.
Why would you do that versus just using one to do both?
Well, one of the reasons I did it was because I had it in my head that a lot of these guys in the 80s used multiple reverbs on lots of tracks. Like they had two types of reverbs, they had a gate and they had a plate and they had all this stuff. So I was kind of experimenting with like how multiple reverbs sound on a vocal track. Then I liked the tone that I got and I just kind of kept it. So
okay.
It was really just an experimentation of using a couple different reverbs.
It sounds like you kind of created a bit of space. Yeah. And then, and by space, I mean kind of like effecty space since it's a plate.
Yeah.
And then you just added more space kind of the second half because it looks like you had a pre-delay on this one as well, right?
Yes, I did. Yep, I set that one to 11 milliseconds, so it kind of hits a reverb at a later time. That's kind of what I was.
You gave it a little bit of overlap and a longer tail on this one. Basically. And the idea is to just kind of thicken the second half of this, it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly.
Or it looks like, rather. Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's a better way of explaining it. Okay. After that, there's a vocal widening effect, which is this guy right here, VWD. This is a bus going right to this effect. The Microshift plugin, which is really just it's a model of, what is it called again? That
the Dimension D.
Yes, yeah, the Dimension D. What this does is it kind of makes a fake stereo kind of sound, or like a fake chorusy sound. It's between a stereo imager and like a chorus sound, and you can get it to sound really tight. What this does is it's basically 100% mix with set to a tight setting, so it's a really tight like stereo widening kind of sound, and then I blended this in just underneath the actual vocal sound. And what this does in the end is it takes your very mono vocal and makes it just a teeny weeny bit wider. Just a tiny bit. It's it's noticeable, but it's not noticeable in context of the entire song, which is awesome because that's what we're going for, right? Yeah. And then after that, I have a dynamic delay effect. This is probably my favorite preset on the Echo Boy by Soundtoy. It's called Popstar Radio Echo. It's pretty amazing. And what I have going on here is a delay effect that is only actually sounding after it's getting. How can I say this? It's kind of a self-contained automated delay. By that I mean I have a delay effect, but I have a compressor on the delay effect that is getting a sidechain from the actual vocal itself, so that it compresses whenever the singer is singing, and then uncompresses when he's not singing. So this Echo Boy becomes audible when he stops singing after a verse, after a chorus. And it kind of saves you some time, and it gets you a really cool vocal sound. You don't have to think about it or anything. The reason there's two of them is because I wanted there to be overlapping Echo Boys for these two vocals, because what I did was I split the vocals into two tracks because he kind of overlaps them, and he just, it's just the way it was tracked. So instead of having one delay that's affecting both tracks, I have two separate delays for both tracks, and they're both doing the same exact thing. One is this Echo 2 is for the second effect, and it's ducking from the actual effect.
So any reason you did that on two separate tracks versus having one send or two sends going to one of them?
Yeah, because what happened was right at this transition where they're overlapping, instead of getting a delay effect here, I just got no delay effect because this guy started singing. So the actual delay sound that I wanted to get in this track disappeared when I was using just one send for both. I wanted to have two independent delays that were not overlapping, that were like that kind of worked with this section. Basically, I wanted there to be like a transition effect. Like when this guy at the top is done singing, you hear some delay, and then at the same time you hear this guy start singing down here. So it's basically just to hear delay tails. That's really why I have that.
Now, for your verbs, you are using the same send to the same return, though, right?
That's true. Yep. So in that department, that's actually happening. Yeah, exactly. The opposite is happening there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's kind of what I got going on. And the last effect, this is basically a distortion effect. I think I remember talking to you guys a little bit earlier about this. This guy's vocals, his low mid range, kind of had this really like consistency to it that I liked. So instead of like just kind of like not doing anything with that, I decided to add a decapitator. It's funny, all of my fun plugins are, all my fun stuff is like nothing but sound toys. I added a decapitator, and I filtered out the high and low end, 29 hertz, that was arbitrary, and then down to 750 hertz, which is kind of where kind of some of his low stuff is. And yeah, this just adds this like really gritty distortion underneath the vocal, and I just kind of blended it in underneath, and it kind of adds this kind of like consistent aggression, almost like a parallel compression kind of effect. You know what I mean?
I mean, ultimately, distortion is compression, so yes, that makes total sense.
Exactly. So yeah, so that's kind of what I had going on with these effects, and I can play them for you. Let's go ahead and take these guys. I want to start at verse 2 because that's where there's a bunch of background vocal stuff that we didn't even get into. So I'll just, so I can just, what I'll do is I'll play that along with it so you guys can get the whole picture of what's going on.
Now you're climbing to the top of the company ladder. Hope it doesn't take too long.
And I should probably turn on these.
Now you're climbing to the top of the company ladder. Hope it doesn't take too long. Can't you see there'll come a day where it won't matter? Come a day when you'll be gone. Whoa. I understand about indecision, but I don't care if I get behind people living in competition. All I want is to have my peace of mind.
Take a look ahead.
Yeah.
Nice.
Good,
Some
dude.
context.
Yeah, and in context, this is what it sounds like. Let's see.
Now you're climbing to the top of the company ladder. Hope it doesn't take too long. Can't you see there'll come a day where it won't matter? Come a day when you'll be gone.
You give me a huge segment.
I understand about indecision, but I don't care if I get behind people living in competition. All I want is to have my peace of mind.
Again, can you give me a huge favor?
What's that?
Can you play that again, mute and unmute all the effects so we can kind of hear with and without?
Sure, I can do that. Do you want me to mute the background vocals, or do you want to keep those up?
You can keep those up. Let's imagine this is in context and relevant, right?
Yeah, sure. Gotcha. I see what you're saying. Yeah, I'll go ahead and I'll just unmute these as I go. And you want me to do it?
Just mute them all. You don't have to do one at a time because one at a time might be subtle.
Okay.
I want to hear kind of the all-encompassing, this is what Dan did to make this fit into a mix.
And
So-
so you want me to just play it in context and unmute all the effects as I play through this?
Yes, please.
Cool. I can do that. Let's see here.
Climbing to the top of the company ladder. Hope it
Distortion on.
too long. Can't you see there'll come a day where
Verb on. 1.
No, hold on.
What's up?
Do all of them at once. It's
Oh,
gonna be-
sorry.
It's going to be too subtle to do one at a time.
Gotcha.
I just want to hear what the total sound that you've created is with versus without.
Got it. Okay, cool.
Otherwise, it's going to be really subtle, and you're not going to really hear the
Changes.
accumulation very well. You know.
Sure. Here we go.
Thank you.
To the top of the company ladder. Hope it doesn't take too long. Can't you see there'll come a day where it won't matter? Come a day when you'll be gone. Whoa. I understand about indecision, but I don't care if I get behind people living in competition. All I want is to have my peace of mind.
So I hear that pretty clearly. Actually,
Sounds
it's
good. There's only one thing that really, really bothers me.
Yeah.
What's
What is?
Actually, it's like a timing thing. When
Oh,
he
is
says,
it? There is a time. There is a weird timing thing in this
when he
track,
says,
isn't
"I
there?
don't care if I get behind," that gets really behind.
yeah. I know, but isn't that kind of like a fun, almost a joke?
I'd like to think it was fun, but it bothers me.
I understand that. I understand. I heard that too. I was like, I swear that was intentional. That's what I was thinking in my head. I'm like, that must be intentional. It's got
Yeah,
to be.
I don't care if I get behind.
Yeah, there's the pause right there.
Yeah, that's super funny.
Yeah,
Yes.
I would just move that.
Yeah, I can do that.
Just nudge it into time. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You know what's cool about when you're killing all those and bringing them all back in?
Yeah.
Yes, it affects the overall volume a tiny bit. It definitely makes the vocal seem brighter,
Yeah.
but in a clearer way.
Yeah.
And it makes the vocal feel very polished, like really, really together when
Yeah.
it's in. And,
Yeah.
and it doesn't, it's the interesting thing about it is that it doesn't sound like this verb. It doesn't sound like this delay. It doesn't sound like all that shit's there.
Yeah.
It just makes it seem smooth and bright and clear. But then when you get rid of it, it sounds like some dude just singing into an SM57 and he sounds super hack.
Yeah.
You know what I
So-
mean? Like it's when
yeah.
it's not there, you go, oh my god, that's what it was before? Fuck.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and what something you just said earlier really kind of resonated with me about having all like control of everything. I think that's really why, and this is me literally thinking like that. I'm literally saying to myself, just trying to get control of all these tracks, the guitars, the vocals, the bass. Every track that's in here is me like completely just taking control of all these tracks. And once I got to that point, and that was one of the revelations I had recently, I'm able to do whatever I want with it to make it sound correct, you know, because before when I did something that I wanted with it, it would sound good for like a second and then get super wacky because it was all out of control, you know? And that's literally what I'm doing, just taking control of all those vocal effects and making them kind of sound a specific way, and then jumping between my reference, which I said was the original Boston tune and that Chris Tomlin track to kind of get a modern version of this track, you know? So, yeah. The other fucked up thing that happened with this track was the guy didn't send me any overheads tracks. So I literally have 0 overheads, just like a room mic. And I was like, all right, let's see how this works. So that happened, but it worked out. I think it worked out. So
No, it sounds really good, man. So I just want to jump to one thing before we kind of get out of here. So
sure.
When you hear a vocal on a like produced track, like a radio ready release,
Yeah.
very fortunate. I've had some of these, which is awesome. It's really cool to be able to say, like, I actually heard a song I worked on the radio. It's awesome. When you hear a vocal on a radio-ready release, what defines that? What makes it, like, this sounds polished and together and, you know, ready to go?
For me, it's just about clarity and control. I know that sounds silly to repeat those words again, but it's really just there's a ridiculous amount of control, and the clarity is just unfair. And that's when I hear that, and I'm like, okay, that encompasses a lot of different topics that we've talked about, but that's what it boils down to. I'm just like, oh my god, how did they make the vocal sound like he's sitting in front of a band, but everything else is completely clear around him? Like when I hear that stuff, I'm just like, oh, so unfair. What do you think, Kenny?
Phew. Uh, I don't know. I guess it has to be like intimate, but also mixed well with everything that's going on around it.
Right. So it's kind of like presence and like a feeling of well, I guess the rest of the mix needs to engulf, right? While this
Yeah.
needs clarity, but it needs to sit inside something else.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, in terms of what we've just gone through now, what that we've done now, it helps us achieve that. Um, the dynamic control using automation gives you this consistency, right? That allows you to place it somewhere, and you
Yep.
don't have to worry about it jumping up and down in that place, right?
Yeah.
We can set it, okay, I want it sitting this far away from me, let's say 3 dB down, or whatever it may be, and now it can sit there. So when it comes to building the rest of the mix around it, yes, you need to build your mix with a space for your vocal, but in order to make your mix or your vocal fit into the rest of your mix, you also need to use things like your stereo wideners you've got here, the stereo delays and your choruses and things like that, in order to make it so that not only do you have a vocal sitting here in the center, you've got it becoming a part of what's around it.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, and then when it comes to clarity, that is the EQ decisions you make to do this corrective stuff. That is also a lot of the harmonic decisions you made with compression. Personally, one thing I do a little differently than you do, Dan, is my release time is as fast as it goes 95% of the time.
Oh, really? Interesting.
And by
Okay.
having the release time be that quick, it makes the tails of my words extraordinarily clear,
Okay. Okay.
which makes it feel like it's someone right in front of you spitting in your face. Not literally, but you know what I mean. Like
Yeah.
it's almost like you feel the lip smacking when they finish saying a word. You hear their mouth close and reopen
Yeah.
to breathe.
Yeah. I
That kind of.
still haven't mastered that vocal delay trick, or the vocal delay, like a
Well, that's
pristine.
not even the delay. That's just the release time on the compressor of the vocal itself.
I see. I see. I see. Okay. Yeah, you're
You know,
right.
so that having that the intimacy of all those vocal details, the mouth details, and I know this sounds kind of gross when you say it that way,
Yeah.
but having that
Yeah.
is what you really hear when you have someone's mouth right in your ear. Like that's the weird shit you notice. That's the intimacy part.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um, so for me, 95% of the time, obviously there's exceptions, the release is as fast as it goes. And
Cool.
that's to bring in all that crap. Um, it's not crap though. I mean, when I say it that way, I didn't really mean it's crap.
All that stuff. Cool. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a good kind of primer for getting your vocals to sound pretty, pretty to a pretty decent point in your mix. Obviously there's many other aspects to this mix that we can probably go over next week, but this week that was vocals, and we hope you guys enjoyed it. We love talking to you guys and geeking out with you guys, and we love all the questions too. The mouth details. That's great, Charlie. I
Yep.
want to hear your mouth details.
Gotta have 'em.
No, it sounds weird, right?
Yeah, it totally does. Cool. Awesome, guys. Well, I want to thank you guys for coming out. If you guys haven't liked the page yet, go to www.mixwednesday.com and stay tuned. Coming weeks, we have some cool stuff lined up for you guys, both in Mix Wednesday and kind of out of it. So more on that later. And this is a great episode. We'll see you guys next week. And remember, go fucking mix. See you guys later.
See ya.
Cheers.
Bye.